let's just hop a train and hang out in Kansas City.
Yep, it would be incredible.
No, there's nothing going on. Let's hop a train to St. Louis and then come back to Springfield by 9 p.m. I mean,
yeah,
could you
I love
imagine? One other question for me before I reopen the floor, because I just have so many great questions here. This is a very nice process question from, oh, stand by, I'm sorry. It's a really, really good question. From Avery Elliott. She asks, when you are getting ready to vote, what are some of the things you think about that in the end will result in not only your vote, but also why you specifically chose that way rather than the other?
That's a really good question.
It's an excellent question.
So, you know, the only thing on my mind when I'm voting is the perspective and viewpoints of my constituents back home. I am fortunate enough, I live in a competitive district, which means I represent 50% of people who voted for me and 50% of people who didn't. I won my first election by 76 votes. The whole thing had to be recounted. It took weeks. It was a razor thin margin.
76.
Yeah, razor thin. So for me, it's recognizing that I'm a voice for the half of my constituency that sent me to Jefferson City, and I'm equally a voice for the half of my constituency who didn't. So you will see me break from my party on votes that I think my constituency wants back home, but never doing it at the expense of what I think is good about humanity and right in the world, right? But so for me, it's knowing I've knocked every door in my district 7 times last cycle. My first cycle, I knocked every door in my district 8 times. I feel like I have a really good grasp on what people want. So when I'm pressing my yes, no, or present button, that's what's circulating in my mind. It is hard though, as you can imagine, sometimes, so we have what we call omnibus bills, or in the Capitol we call them Christmas tree bills. So you could have one bill that I love, and then through the amendment process or through the committee process, there could be 10 bills tacked on that I hate. So when I'm pressing a button, oftentimes you're not just voting on that one thing, you're voting on 15 things, and you're trying to weigh, is this gonna do more harm or more good? And sometimes that's really hard. Sometimes we can have a bill that would maybe do harm to a small group of people, but it could help a large group of people. But if that harm that it does to that small group of people is really, really horrible, then weighing the needs of your constituents can be really difficult. So one of the debates that we're having right now, to your question earlier, is a bill, and I won't get into the weeds on it, but a bill that could potentially raise prescription pharmaceutical costs, maybe slightly for one group of people, but reduce it for a bunch of people. So it's like, how do you figure out in that situation when you have all of these lobbyists and all of these advocacy groups and people coming to you and telling you, hey, please don't do this, it's gonna make my healthcare more costly, and then you have a bunch of people coming and say, like the Cancer Association coming and saying, hey, can you vote for this bill? It's gonna reduce the cost of cancer treatments, and you have people begging you to do both. It can be really hard, and you just always have to keep in mind, is this gonna do more harm or more good for my people back home? And that's the only question that matters.
I'm gonna reopen the floor. Any questions or thoughts for Representative Fogle?
What were some struggles you faced campaigning as the minority party in Missouri?
Yeah, so, man, I will open this question by saying I feel really fortunate that I represent the city of Springfield, because it is one of the few places that is pretty much split 50-50 in political ideology, right? So our Senator Lincoln Huff does a great job representing the city of Springfield, who's a Republican. He won his election by a few percentage points. I won mine by 76 votes my first go around. We have Republicans in Springfield who won by narrow margins and Democrats who won by narrow margins. So I feel lucky in that I feel we do have more accountability to one another because we're more bipartisan in nature, and Springfield is a very collaborative place, so I'm thankful for that. I will also say, when you're out knocking doors and somebody opens and you can have, a 3-minute conversation, and then inevitably they're gonna say, what political party do you represent? And as soon as you answer that question, people can be like, oh my gosh, I'll love you forever, you're my best friend, and people can pull out their gun and say, get off my property, right? So I think regardless of political party, regardless of what you're running for, knocking doors or having political conversations is one of the most polarizing things, right? People always tell you when you're at a dinner party, what are the things you don't talk about? Politics and religion, right? So, I don't know, I feel fortunate in that I live in a community that isn't near as polarizing. If I am out in, where my grandparents live in Berry County, south of Monette, where 80% of people vote for Trump, and somebody finds out that I'm a Democrat, those conversations look a little bit different than they do in Springfield. Or if I'm in the city of St. Louis, where 85% of those people are voting for Democrats and my Republican colleagues go there, those conversations look a little bit different. But here in Springfield, I feel like we do a relatively good job of working across the aisle, and that reflects in our constituency.
We had, if you're a Chiefs fan, it's been a very good year. But of course, following the Super Bowl, there was an awful mass shooting. Question inspired by that from Ethan Evans. What are your thoughts on personal freedom, and how does that affect your stance on gun control?
Absolutely. So I said this earlier, the most polarizing things that we talk about, abortion and guns, right? So at the Kansas City Super Bowl parade, I was actually scheduled to go to that and then ended up not going because we had a budget hearing noticed up. So stayed behind all of my colleagues. Most of my colleagues went to the parade and were there front and center when the shooting broke out. As I'm sure you guys witnessed all the footage, and maybe some of you had loved ones there, it's very traumatic. I will say, I think important things to note is, number one, that got a lot of public attention, as it would. It was a mass shooting at a Super Bowl parade, but we have gun violence that happens every day in our community. It just doesn't get the same level of attention. We have gun violence that happens every day in the city of St. Louis, every day in the city of Kansas City, and every day in our rural communities. And I think we need to do something about it. We had a school shooting 2 years ago in a public school in St. Louis, and we have not taken meaningful steps to address gun violence. I am not saying that people shouldn't have guns. I am saying we should have responsible gun laws that allow gun owners the freedoms that our Constitution enshrines upon them, but also ensures that innocent people aren't dying because the wrong people have guns. It is a nuanced conversation, and we should acknowledge that it's nuanced. And I'll be honest, my side of the aisle, we don't always do a good job of acknowledging that it's a nuanced debate. We want to see everything as black and white, and we want our way or the highway. And I will say a lot of Republicans feel the same way on their side of the aisle. They view any step of negotiating as a weakness, and the NRA has a lot of power. But I think when we know factually that more kids in this country die by gun violence than anything else, we have to do something about it. And if there's somebody that disagrees with me on that, I welcome that debate every single day. And again, I'm not saying that means that there shouldn't be guns anywhere. I come from a family of farmers. They have guns on the wall. But what they don't have is an assault rifle walking into a public school, or an assault rifle walking into a public space, or they're not 13 years old carrying an assault rifle down the streets of St. Louis, and we have no state law that makes that illegal. So my comment back to that would be, we need to start engaging in good faith about how to keep people safe in our communities. And until we do that, I think we're all somewhat guilty of the culture and the climate that has allowed so many innocent people to die by gun violence, including, quite frankly, suicide. We need to make sure that people, a bill that was filed this year is, if you're somebody who struggles with depression, that you could put yourself on a voluntary list that says, please don't sell me a gun. That would be not mandatory, it would be completely voluntary, but that bill hasn't gone anywhere. If you know somebody who's struggling with depression or some other mental health affliction, there are times that people know, I'm not safe around a firearm. And if I don't have access to a firearm, I can get through this stint and I can get help. But even that is viewed as an infringement of the Second Amendment. And I think until we can start debating in good faith, both sides of the aisle, we're not going to move anywhere.
Okay. Thank you so much for visiting. Round of applause for her real quick. Ma'am, I'm a constituent who's interested in reaching out to you. What's the best way to do it?
Absolutely. If you are interested in reaching out to me, you can Google our House accounts. So if you just type in like Betsy Fogle, State Representative, it'll pull up my House account, and my email is listed there. And you can contact me there if you have questions on bills, if you want me to file a bill, if you want me to kill a bill, if you have any thoughts at all. That's a really good way of reaching out to all of us elected officials. It's house.mo.gov is the website, and you can just type in our names and contact any of your elected officials.
All right, thank you so much for speaking to
Yeah,
us. Okay,
of
so
course.
at this point, guys, I just want to give you a shout going forward. Like I said, we have no assignments for Monday. You will see the grades from the exam you guys just sweat over on Wednesday. Those will get posted today. And I will see you guys really work to decompress over the next week, and then we'll get back at it, okay? Thank you so much. Appreciate it.